My mother collapsed in front of the entire family, clutching her chest after sipping a drink my own sister had made for me. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a family gathering, it was a battlefield. I'm Jenna, the daughter they always underestimated, the sister who spent years living in my sibling's shadow. Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone you trusted most tried to erase you from your own life? What if you had to choose between staying silent or exposing the darkest secret at your own dinner table? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been betrayed by the people closest to you? Hold on tight because what happened next changed everything. Here's how I turned the tables in the ultimate fight for justice. She made that drink just for me. So, why did my mother collapse after drinking it? The room was humming with polite laughter and the low, golden light of early evening. In the Claymore family, gatherings like this were rare. Everyone too busy, too distant, too practiced at performing togetherness. But tonight, the pretense of unity seemed thicker than ever, as if Camille had willed it into being with sheer force of will. My sister greeted me at the door, her arms already open wide, her voice just a decibel too loud. "Here you are. Here's a special drink for you." Her words echoed above the clinking of glass and rustling of silk. She pressed a chilled glass into my hand, pink liquid fizzing, a wedge of citrus perched perfectly on the rim. Her smile was dazzling, practiced, toothy, hungry. "I made it just for you, Jenna," she purred, holding my gaze a moment too long. I felt the press of her fingers on mine, firm, insistent. Behind her, Eleanor, our mother, looked a little faded, standing with one hand on her temple. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes were rimmed with fatigue. Camille, always on cue, swept an arm around her waist and pressed a small vitamin bottle into her palm. "Take these, Mom. You need them," she stage whispered, just loud enough for the guests to hear how attentive she was. I flashed back to other gatherings, Camille always arriving with herbal teas, brain boosters, little gifts for Mom, always when I was out of the room. Once, I asked Mom about the pills. "Chi kan bao tat cho try no me to know," she had said, unwrapping a vitamin with childlike trust. That trust was a river that always ran one way. Tonight, the river had an undertow. The house was full. Relatives I barely recognized, old friends of Dad's, neighbors from 3 blocks away. Camille played the perfect host, gliding between groups with practiced warmth. I felt like a misplaced piece of furniture, tucked near the kitchen, half out of sight. Every now and then, I caught my father, Douglas, looking around in confusion, as if he was scanning for the nearest exit. Camille's voice rang out. "Let's toast to our parents. May their health last forever." Glasses rose, and the room shimmered with expectation. I watched Camille as she watched me, her gaze lingering on the drink in my hand. There was a flicker of calculation just for a split second, but enough to make my spine tighten. I moved to the long, crowded table, slipped quietly into a seat near the edge, where the glow of the chandelier didn't quite reach. The glass was cool against my palm. Around me, conversation swirled, compliments for Camille's floral arrangements, her menu, her taste in music. Victor Romero, our family lawyer, sat 2 seats down, murmuring with my aunt. Camille's eyes darted to him, then back to me. My mother sat beside me, smiling weakly. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered, squeezing my hand. I set my glass down as if to adjust my napkin. No one noticed. The guests' attention was drawn to Camille, now delivering a toast about gratitude, legacy, the importance of protecting family. As she basked in their applause, I slid her drink, my drink, across the table, replacing it with my mother's untouched one. It was a seamless motion like swapping forks or passing salt. My heart thudded once, hard, then stilled. I took a slow breath, letting the moment settle. Across the table, a small child darted by, nearly knocking into me. I clutched the stem of my glass as if it were a lifeline, unwilling to let it spill, unwilling to let fate slip out of my grasp. Camille's toast ended in a round of laughter. She looked back at me, searching my face for something, a flicker of fear, maybe, or gratitude. Instead, I smiled thinly. She moved to her mother's side, whispered something in her ear. Victor's head lifted, brow furrowed. He caught the last syllable, but not the meaning. I let the scene play out. I said nothing. The ice clinked quietly as I swirled the drink, feigning interest in its color, its garnish, its perfection. Minutes passed. My mother's laughter faded, replaced by a faint furrowing of her brow. She pressed her hand to her temple again, shook her head as if to clear it. "Are you all right?" I asked softly. She tried to answer, but her words slurred. Suddenly, Eleanor staggered to her feet, her glass slipping from her fingers. The slow-motion horror of it, the crystals striking tile, the sharp crack echoing through the chatter, the room going silent as she crumpled, clutching at air. Someone screamed. Chairs scraped back. Camille rushed to Eleanor's side, face pale, voice shrill with panic. "Mom? Mom?" The music died. In the chaos, as a crowd gathered around my mother, I remained seated, oddly calm. I wrapped the napkin around the untouched cocktail, the one meant for me, and placed it carefully in front of me. Victor pushed through the cluster, reaching for my mother's wrist to check her pulse. He looked up, eyes searching for answers. Camille's composure shattered. She was frantic, talking over everyone, gesturing at me. She seemed fine. She was laughing a minute ago. But she kept glancing at my hands, at the drink, at the napkin, at my face. I leaned in, speaking low so only Victor and a few relatives could hear. "That's the drink she made for me," I said, voice even. "I didn't drink it." Victor's eyes widened. He glanced at the glass, then at Camille, then at me. A nod, sharp and silent. The first thread of the web tightening. A paramedic team rushed in, flooding the entryway with cold, blue-white light. The air, moments ago heavy with warmth, turned brittle. The guests were buzzing, their whispers gaining volume and speed. I rose, moving toward the commotion, not to help, but to witness. To see who watched, who looked away. A police officer appeared beside the medics. "Does anyone know what Mrs. Claymore has taken? Any medications, any drinks, anything unusual?" Camille turned, her voice shaking. She only had what I made for her. I swear. I stepped forward, locking eyes with her. "Why don't you tell them, Camille?" I asked, soft and steady, but loud enough for the room to hear. "After all, it was your special recipe." The silence was dense, oppressive. Even the youngest children stilled, the hum of conversation giving way to the ringing hush of crisis. Victor signaled to an officer, pointing discreetly at the napkin-wrapped glass. In the background, a guest's phone caught the whole exchange, an accidental witness, framing the truth before the story had even begun. As the paramedics lifted my mother, I met Camille's gaze one last time. There was terror there and confusion, and something else, the moment a predator recognizes another hunter. I didn't drink it, and that, I knew, was the beginning of the end. She was always the golden one, and I was always the afterthought. I stood outside the hospital entrance, watching through the tinted glass as the paramedics loaded my mother into the ambulance. Blue lights flashed across Camille's perfectly pale face. I felt nothing but a hollow ringing in my ears, a strange, focused clarity. In that moment, 100 memories crashed down on me, snapshots of years where every crisis circled back to Camille, where every solution required me to disappear. Flashback. 10 years old. My own birthday party. A sagging sheet cake. Cheap party hats. I unwrapped my only gift. A paperback mystery. Camille unwrapped hers. A gleaming violin. It's so she can start lessons. She has a real gift, Mom explained to the guests. Dad gave me an embarrassed smile before turning away. Camille didn't even feign surprise. She just ran her hands over the varnish and said with a shrug, "Jenna won't mind. She's always so generous." I learned early. In this house, Camille's needs were urgent and celebrated. Mine were background noise, something to pat on the head and ignore. Even now, sitting in my childhood bedroom, walls still covered in faded wallpaper and old family photos, I felt like an imposter in my own life. The old family calendar hung behind the kitchen door. I brushed my fingers over the worn months, each box filled with Camille's recitals, school meetings, helping Mom with errands. My squares were mostly empty or filled in last. Jenna, dentist for PM. Mom's voice floated from the living room. Jenna, can you help your sister with something? It was always help your sister, never Jenna's turn. In the present, I sat in my tiny apartment, leafing through old journals and albums. The air was stale, the room too quiet. I stared at the pages, my own handwriting growing sharper each year, the tone hardening. Why does Camille get everything? Why doesn't anyone listen to me? Why does it always feel like I'm invisible? At the company office last spring, the same pattern played out. Douglas, Dad, stood before a room full of investors, his hand on Camille's shoulder. "My strategic successor," he announced, beaming, "the future of Claymore Enterprises." Not a word about me, not even as a formality. My shares were a technicality, an afterthought. I sat at the far end of the table, clutching my pen so tightly it left an imprint. Later that night at the family dinner, Camille was radiant, charming the room. She served her special wild mushroom risotto, going on about her organic sources, her cooking classes. "Try it, Jenna, you'll love it." "Mom, doesn't Jenna need to be more adventurous?" Mom beamed at Camille, nodding approval. I chewed slowly, feeling my head swim and my pulse race. Afterward, Camille gave my shoulder a faux concerned squeeze. "Don't be dramatic, Jenna. You always get so anxious over nothing. It's probably just stress." Even then, I was starting to see the pattern, my headaches, my nausea, my exhaustion, always after Camille had helped with a meal or fixed my drink. But any time I voiced concern, Mom would brush it off. "Don't make such a fuss. Camille knows what she's doing." That refrain was as old as my memories. Another flashback, in Dad's office. I had a whole plan to open a used bookstore, proposals, budgets, even sample suppliers. Dad barely glanced at my paperwork. "It's not the right time, Jenna. Besides, Camille's photography studio is a better investment for the family right now. Why don't you help her get started?" I nodded, folded up my dreams, and watched Camille bask in their pride. I never brought up the bookstore again. Now, bitterness calcified into something sharper, a suspicion I couldn't shake. I logged into the family trust account, using credentials I'd found scribbled on a sticky note. The numbers looked normal, but then I found a recently filed document. Application for medical power of attorney, Eleanor Claymore. Petitioner, Camille Claymore. Reason, evidence of cognitive decline. My heart stilled. Attached, an incident log in Camille's neat handwriting, listing every time Mom misplaced her keys, every forgotten date, every slip. She was building a case, not just drugging them, but documenting the decline, constructing proof that only she could be trusted to care for our parents. I downloaded every file, copied them to a flash drive. So she's not just drugging them. I whispered to myself, cold and numb. She's documenting the decline. It was a chilling realization. My invisibility wasn't an accident. It was engineered, brick by the golden child and parents who never saw me. I emailed Victor. I need to talk, privately, about the trust and Camille's access. He replied almost immediately. I thought you knew. She's already asked to amend the successor clause. On my laptop, a line from one of Camille's emails to Mom popped up in bold. Jenna is emotionally unstable. Camille will assume medical POA. The words burned behind my eyes. It was all there. Now it was my turn to build the record, page by page, fact by fact. The invisible sister, ready to be seen? If you want to erase someone quietly, make them doubt their own mind first. The image of my mother collapsing at the family gathering haunted me every night. The replay in my mind was sharper than any nightmare. The sound of her glass shattering, Camille's shrill voice rising, the sudden, suffocating silence as everyone watched my mother slip to the floor. But what truly haunted me was Victor's quiet words after, his warning that Camille had already tried to change the will. That fall wasn't an accident. It was the result of months, maybe years of manipulation. So I decided, this time I wouldn't just watch. I'd record, track, build a case. If Camille wanted to play legal chess, I'd outmaneuver her move by move. I started showing up at my parents' house at odd times, unannounced. One rainy Thursday, I arrived to find Camille already there, bustling in the kitchen, humming to herself. She wore her caregiver face, all gentle smiles and faux concern. I brought Mom some new supplements, really great for memory. Want to see? She pressed a small white pill into my mother's palm and handed her a glass of orange juice. My mother, exhausted and trusting, swallowed it without question. I watched every detail. The label on the bottle was nearly rubbed away, the font generic, no pharmacy name. When no one was looking, I quietly slipped one of the pills into a tissue and stashed it in my pocket. Back at my own apartment, the place felt like a detective's den. I'd covered my coffee table with charts, columns for dates, symptoms, meals, visitors. Every time Eleanor had an episode, dizziness, confusion, even an outburst, I marked it down, then compared it to Camille's visits or home-cooked meals. The pattern was undeniable. Tick-tock. Every click of my pen, every scribble in my notebook was another piece of evidence. I even installed a tiny camera in the tea cabinet, masked behind a box of herbal blends. The first footage I watched, I saw Camille swapping out a bottle, her eyes darting, lips pressed thin. I saved the clip, labeled it, and backed it up twice. The next day, I visited my old college friend Max, now a pharmacist. I showed him the pill in a small plastic bag. He studied it, then ran a quick chemical test. This is a mild sedative, Jenna. Not something you'd want anyone taking long-term. This could cause memory lapses, confusion, even fainting if mixed with the wrong meds. Where did you get this? Family, I answered, jaw tight. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press further. I thanked him and left, my heart beating hard. I was done being afraid. At my parents' house again, I went straight to the medicine cabinet while my mother napped. I found several more of the same pills, but in a different bottle. This one had the label peeled off, the cap taped shut. A few capsules looked nearly identical, but there were subtle differences, slightly rougher coating, a faint chemical smell. I poured them onto a white handkerchief, snapped a photo, then zipped them into a plastic bag for my growing file. My mother snored gently from the living room, her face slack with exhaustion. It broke my heart. Tick-tock. At the next family dinner, Camille was in top form. She'd cooked everything: roast chicken, a complicated souffle, some odd herbal soup. I touched none of it, making excuses about an upset stomach. She noticed. Aren't you going to eat, Jenna? You always used to love my cooking. I looked her straight in the eyes and smiled coldly. I just don't trust anyone who smiles while handing me pills. The words hung in the air, sharp as a blade. She blinked, lips parting in surprise, but she quickly recovered. Oh, you're always so dramatic, she laughed, but her gaze lingered on me, uncertain now. After dinner, I compiled my evidence, photos, charts, the video of Camille switching pill bottles, the pharmacist's report. I called Victor to my apartment. He listened in silence as I presented everything, laying it all out on the table between us. He thumbed through the charts, the photos, the test results. Jesus, Jenna, he breathed. She's not just drugging them. She's making your mother weaker on purpose. She's not just drugging them. I repeated, my voice cold. She's building a case that they need her, so she can take everything. Victor looked at me, his face a mix of anger and admiration. If this is all true, Jenna, this isn't just a family dispute anymore. Are you ready to take this legal? I shook my head, lips twisting into a half smile. Not yet. I want her to feel safe, right before the ground vanishes beneath her feet. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet apartment. This time, I wasn't just fighting for my parents. I was fighting for every version of myself that had ever been ignored, overlooked, or erased. The invisible sister was invisible no more. She made the drink with her usual smile. I switched it with the same. The sun was setting behind the big oaks, throwing golden ribbons across the Claymore Estate's garden as the party came to life. String lights glowed overhead, acoustic music drifted through the air, and Camille was in her element, radiating hostess energy, laughing with a brightness that seemed to pull the world into her orbit. This was supposed to be Dad's retirement party, but everyone could see. Tonight belonged to Camille. I moved through the crowd quietly, blending in. My eyes found Victor in the corner, scanning the guests with the analytical calm of someone waiting for the curtain to rise. I caught his eye. He gave me the smallest nod. You said you needed a stage, he had whispered to me that morning. Just make sure when it happens, everyone sees. Camille glided up beside me, beaming. You look tense, Jenna, she purred, voice syrupy. Let's make you something fun. You trust me, don't you? She led me to a small table near the bar, where bottles and fresh herbs were lined up like props. Try this. Made it just for you. She set to work with the precision of a magician, muddling mint, slicing lemon, swirling ice. Her hands barely trembled as she poured the pale pink cocktail into a heavy crystal glass and placed it in front of me with a flourish. I smiled back, sweet, vacant, unreadable. Thank you, Camille. You always know what I need. She grinned, watching me with that old hungry look, as if she could already taste her victory. A child darted underfoot, nearly bumping the table. I seized the moment, accidentally, dropping my napkin and bending to retrieve it. My hand slid under the table, where I switched my glass for another identical one from the tray, marking the base with a tiny scratch from my nail. When I rose, the drink I now held was as cool and innocent as ever. Camille didn't notice a thing. She circled back a few minutes later. Did you try it yet? I nodded, feigning delight. It's perfect, I said, turning away to join Victor, who stood by the dessert buffet. As Camille moved on, I quietly set the marked glass back among the others. It would be picked up again, this time by her. Conversations swirled around me, friends gossiping, relatives reliving old glories. I played the part of the overlooked daughter, asking about vacation plans and new cars, all the while watching Camille move through the party. She was everywhere, checking on guests, checking on our mother, who sat near the fountain looking brighter than she had in months. I had made sure Eleanor didn't touch anything Camille had brought. Today, my mother would not be a casualty. Then Camille, arms full of charm, returned for her own drink, my marked glass. Eleanor, ever the observer, teased her. "Aren't you going to toast with us, Camille? You worked so hard." Camille hesitated, glancing at me. For a second, I saw calculation flicker across her face. But pride, or maybe something darker, won out. She clinked glasses with Mom and took a long sip. 25 minutes passed. The party's warmth started to crack. Camille's laughter grew forced. Sweat formed at her hairline. Her eyes lost focus. A few relatives asked quietly, "Are you all right?" She waved them off with a brittle smile. Victor approached me. "She used that exact blend on Mom last time," I whispered. "Let's see how she handles it herself." The energy shifted. Guests sensed something was wrong. Camille pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to stay upright as her vision spun. I moved into the center of the patio. The crowd quieted. I held up my untouched glass, the one meant for me. "Camille," I called softly but clearly, "are you sure I drank what you gave me? Because this is still full." Time seemed to stop. Camille froze, pale and stunned. Whispers rippled through the crowd, accusations, questions, confusion. Eleanor went completely still, watching her eldest daughter with dawning horror. Victor's face hardened as he gestured for the caterers to leave Jenna's glass untouched. Camille tried to speak, but her voice failed. She staggered, reaching for a chair, but missed and nearly fell. A small child pointed at her glass. "That's Aunt Jenna's glass." I saw her put a scratch on it. No one missed the implication. Eleanor, shaking, asked Camille, "Did you really drink Jenna's?" Camille's lips moved, but no words came. Her face went from arrogance to desperation. All her carefully constructed lies, her care, her charm, collapsed in real time under the glow of the party lights. I bent down and calmly buttoned Mom's coat for her, as if nothing extraordinary were happening. Victor stepped forward, his voice carrying above the shocked hush. "We need an ambulance. Now." The music had stopped long ago, but the thudding in my chest kept tempo with the crisis. Camille sank into a chair, hands shaking, skin clammy. I leaned in just enough so she could hear me over the gathering chaos. "Now you know how it feels." Her eyes met mine, wide, wild, desperate. As the sound of sirens approached, Victor turned to me. "It's time." She thought she was building a case against my mother. She didn't know I was building one against her. The world felt oddly silent as the last of the party lights flickered out. The living room in my parents' house was crowded but frozen, no one quite knowing where to look or what to say. The faint beeping of medical monitors and the clipped words of the EMTs lingered in the background as they tended to Camille, whose color was coming back only in trembling patches. I stood apart, cold and steady, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Victor's hand rested on a folder so thick it barely closed, a file that, until today, had only been shared between the two of us. For years, Camille had spun her web, but now the strands were visible, sticky and damning, stretching from her desperate smile to every corner of this house. I remembered her words from hours earlier, her voice honey-sweet as she leaned in at the party. "Don't worry, Jenna. I'll take care of everything when the time comes." Well, Camille, the time had come. And nothing was going to plan, at least not hers. The front door opened, and a trio of police officers entered, led by a stern detective with gray at his temples. Victor cleared his throat. "I think everyone should stay," he announced. "There are things that must be addressed before anyone leaves tonight." Guests huddled close, some exchanging uneasy glances. My father, always so decisive, looked lost. My mother watched Camille with a fear she had never shown her daughters before. I stepped forward and handed Victor my entire arsenal, my notebook, a USB drive with the security footage from the kitchen, photographs, and lab results. Victor arranged everything on the coffee table, his every movement deliberate, almost ritualistic. The detective glanced at the evidence, then at Camille. "We'll need to see your bag, ma'am." Camille hesitated, but under the weight of the room's attention, she handed it over. Inside, the officers found 3 vials of pills, 2 with faded labels and 1 with none at all. The detective handed the pills to a technician. "We'll run a test, but these appear to match the substances found in the victim system," he said, then turned to Camille. "It's just a supplement," Camille insisted, her voice cracking. "I've only been helping Mom. She's not well, she needs." Victor slid a printed email across the table. "This was sent to a family attorney 3 weeks ago," he said. In it, Camille requests information about amending the will should both parents be deemed legally incompetent. She also writes, "Let's speed things up. Care to explain, Camille?" Camille's lips trembled. "You're twisting this. Jenna always hated me. She's the one who poisoned me. She switched the drinks." I met her gaze, letting the accusation bounce off. "I switched the drinks, yes. Because I knew what you were doing. And now, so does everyone else." The words landed like stones in a quiet pond. I pressed play on a recording from my phone. Camille's voice filled the room, cool and clinical. "If Mom keeps slipping, we'll need to get ahead of it, before Jenna complicates things." My mother's hand fluttered to her mouth. "Did you," she whispered, voice breaking. "Did you make me sick, Camille? All those weeks, was it you?" Camille's face crumpled. She stammered, tried to speak, but no one listened. The detective nodded. "Camille Claymore, you'll need to come with us for further questioning regarding elder abuse and attempted fraud." She shrank in her seat, no longer fighting, just wilting as 2 officers helped her up. Victor closed the folder and looked at me. "She has no legal ground," he said to the detective. "All her guardianship filings are based on symptoms she manufactured. The evidence is right here." I took a slow breath, stepped forward, and placed my notebook on the table. "This is the record of everything you tried to erase," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Page by page, symptom by symptom, lie by lie." My father finally broke his silence, turning to me, voice trembling. "What now?" I didn't spare Camille another glance. "Now we fix the will." As Camille was led away, I watched the faces of my family, shock, grief, and a faint glimmer of respect from the father who'd never truly seen me before. The house felt empty, even with all the guests and officers present, as if the lie that had held us together was finally gone. Somewhere, as the police searched Camille's room, I knew they'd find more. Bottles with no labels, medicines with tampered caps, every secret tucked away for emergencies. The evidence would keep coming, and this time it was all on my side. Eleanor sat quietly, dabbing tears with a handkerchief from her lap, the same gesture I'd learned as a child. Victor's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried all the weight in the world. "It's over, Jenna. She can't hurt them anymore." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. She poisoned the trust between us. I rewrote the legacy without her name. The conference room in Victor's office was all glass and old mahogany, cold sunlight sharpening every angle. The silence was thick. On one side of the table, Victor laid out the old will, its pages trembling a little in his hand. Across from him, my parents sat close but didn't touch. Eleanor's lips pressed tight, her knuckles white against her lap. Douglas tried to look at me, but his gaze faltered, weighted with regret. Victor began, his voice low, almost apologetic. The current will of the Claymore estate leaves Camille as sole successor, with Jenna to receive only a monthly payment. This was signed 6 years ago. The words hung like a sentence in the air. Eleanor broke first. Her composure cracked. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent but unrelenting. Douglas looked at the tabletop, lips working. We thought we were doing what was right. We didn't see. Victor paused, then turned to me and slid the new document across. I placed my palm flat on the paper, feeling the texture of real change. The new will was short, sharp, and final. Everything would now be divided equally. I was to hold custodial power over every asset, every transfer. Camille was erased, her name crossed out in ink. Her claim to the family's legacy ended not with drama, but with a single signature. Pen in hand, I hesitated for only a second. The memory of my father's old words came back. Legacy is for the one who protects it. He'd meant Camille then, certain his golden child would safeguard everything he built. But I was the one left holding the line. My hand shook just a little. Then I pressed hard, signing my name with slow, deliberate force. The ink didn't blot. Victor passed the document to Douglas. My father's hand trembled so violently, I thought the pen would fall. For a moment, his mask slipped. He looked at me, truly looked at me, as if seeing all the years he'd missed. We failed you, he whispered, the words hoarse and real. But not again. I held his gaze, nodded once. No forgiveness, not yet, just acknowledgement. When Victor signed last, he reached for my hand. I'll file this myself, he said softly. Your family deserves some peace. He nodded at Eleanor, who sat crying quietly, clutching her old handkerchief, a delicate piece of cloth, corners frayed, initials EC embroidered in fading blue. I realized she gripped it the way I once did as a child, both of us holding on to something that hurt and healed. The room faded to white as the morning sun brightened. I let my eyes close, listening to the subtle shift, the scratch of the pen, the soft gasp from my mother, the click of Victor's ring against glass. There was no applause. Only justice settling into place, cold but clean. I left the Claymore mansion on a Sunday morning, taking nothing but a suitcase, my battered notebooks, one photo of my mother as a young woman, and that same handkerchief. Moving into my new house on the edge of the woods, I let myself exhale for the first time in years. The place was small, sunlight pooling in the kitchen by late afternoon, pine needles dusting the porch steps. When I opened the windows, the scent of new earth and rosemary filled every room. My days became rituals of reclamation. In the early hours, I worked in the yard, planting rows of basil, thyme, and lavender. I kept a framed photo of my mother, fierce, young, before bitterness, above my desk. The battered black notebook, filled with years of symptoms, dates, and clues, I locked in the back of my closet. But in the kitchen drawer, I kept one printout, a single email from Camille to her lawyer. Let's speed things up. I would take it out sometimes, a reminder that peace was something earned, not gifted. Above the stove, I taped a small slip of paper, my own mantra now. Silence can be justice. On the day Victor sent Camille the formal notice, the sky was a pale blue. He copied me on the letter. You are hereby removed from all financial and custodial rights under the Claymore Family Trust, effective immediately. Minutes later, Camille replied. The words were brittle with disbelief. You can't do this. I answered her myself, one line, typing slowly and letting every keystroke close a door forever. I already did. Time passed quietly in my new world. Some days I heard from my parents, voicemails left by my mother, always starting with my name, but trailing off into static. I listened sometimes, but I never called back. I built new routines. Evenings with tea on the porch, the slow sweep of wind through the trees, the smell of fresh-cut herbs lingering long after sunset. One afternoon, as the sky glowed orange, a little girl from next door appeared, cheeks flushed, curls wild, holding out a plate of cookies. "My mom said you might like these," she said. I crouched down, smiled. Genuine, gentle, unguarded. "Thank you. Come by any time, okay?" It was the first time in years I'd opened the door for anyone, and I meant it. After she left, I stood at the window, watching the forest beyond the clearing. I saw my reflection in the glass, not the invisible sister, not the victim, but a woman who had chosen her own ending. The phone buzzed on the counter.
Mom.
I watched it ring, the number flickering, then fading. I turned away, walked to the front door, and drew the bolt across with a quiet, final click. The piano from the living room played soft in the background, a steady, cleansing melody. Sunlight shifted from cold white to gold, bathing the house in gentle warmth. I locked the door, stood still, and listened to the silence. Not the silence of fear, or exile, or regret, but the silence of a story finally finished, the wall rebuilt, the will rewritten, and no ghosts left behind. Now, after everything, I stand in a place of peace and strength, my life and my dignity finally restored. The storm has passed, and I have reclaimed not just my family's legacy, but my own worth. What I learned is simple. You cannot control what others do to you, but you can choose to fight for yourself. And when you do, truth and justice will find their way back. In the end, greed and betrayal always reveal their true cost, and no lie can outlast time or courage. Have you ever faced betrayal or had to stand alone for what is right? I invite you to share your own stories or thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your experience could inspire someone else on their journey. If this story resonated with you, follow for more powerful dramas about justice and redemption. What kind of truth do you want to see revealed next?